started with the program. Find a seat. It's fun to catch up with old friends, and we'll have a lot of time to do that as well afterwards. But I'm Rhonda Weather. I'm the Executive Director of SOS Community Services. Thank you all for being here today. I know that back in the year 2000, we tried to do a 50th anniversary celebration, and we were cut short by the pandemic, so we're so happy to come together for 55 and have a little celebration of the history of SOS and bring in and honor some of our founding volunteers and board members as well as staff. So thanks for coming today, especially our panelists, Mike Loradian, Alfredo Rooks, and John Brandenberry. John especially came a long way to be here today. I'd like to thank him for getting SOS off the ground back in 1970, and Mike and Alfredo for making sure that SOS was there for people who needed help the most in the 1980s and 1990s. 55 years after SOS was founded, there is still a tremendous need for our services. Demand for our services continues to be higher now than it was pre-pandemic. We are serving 300 households per week in our food pantry, and more than 100 families with children are homeless and on the shelter waiting list in Washtenaw County. However, programs to help families with low income during the pandemic have ended, and now both safety net services are seeing significant cuts in government funding as well. Just to give you some updates on some of our key programs, update on the food program. As many of you have read, in M-Line, Food Gatherers faces a significant deficit in the coming year due to cuts to federal food assistance dollars, notably TPAC. And the cuts are likely to impact the amount of food that Food Gatherers is able to give us for our pantry. Food Gatherers is currently fundraising a close to $2 million gap in their budget to keep food distribution at the current level through the current fiscal year, and they have raised about $900,000 so far from the county and the city of Ann Arbor. With the increase in cost of groceries in recent years and more cuts to federal food assistance, including SNAP benefits that recently came about in the last few weeks, demand at SOS and other food pantries we anticipate will significantly increase over the coming year. Update on our rapid rehousing programs. In January of 2025, SOS received a notice from the U.S. Department of Health for Housing and Urban Development that our rapid rehousing funding had been cut. These cuts likely took place before the current presidential administration, but as a result of this funding cut, Washtenaw County will be losing 26 rapid rehousing units in the coming year. Now, in rapid rehousing, as many of you know, the homeowner, or I should say the household, leases up their own apartments, and then SOS comes in to provide rental assistance as well as case management services. Families are usually in these units for about 12 months. Most families who leave rapid rehousing are able to maintain their permanent housing on their own long term. They do not cycle back into homelessness compared to those who leave after shelter or without supportive services. So it's a very effective program. I have another page. Now we have an update on our shelter services. With the support of the state of Michigan and Washtenaw County, we and our partners are expanding shelter services for families. Interfaith Hospitality Network is adding 30 additional units of family shelter in the Towsley Center building on the Trinity campus, and 8 more units of family shelter by master leasing single-family homes. SOS is also adding 12 more units of emergency shelter to our master leasing program as well. In our program, SOS is the leaseholder with the landlord, and families must transition out of shelter to their own housing within 4 months. So shelter helps families to escape homelessness in the immediate future, and so they're not going to be living on the streets, but it does not allow them to really develop a positive rental history on their own, and it also doesn't allow them time to really significantly increase their income to the point where they're going to be able to shelter units will help to fill a gap in the short run for families. What's next? Well, with the passage of the new budget bill, HUD has been cut 44%. It is anticipated most of those cuts coming through housing choice vouchers. And Medicaid and Social Security are also on the chopping block for that as well. The loss of housing choice vouchers, although we don't specifically administer those programs, we have a number of people sitting over at this table who help individuals who receive those vouchers to lease up the vouchers and to mitigate any potential voucher loss by working with the landlord, working with the consumer, working however, whatever needs to be done within the community to help families retain their vouchers. So we hope that the loss of vouchers to our community, probably all saw the article in MLive last week about the potential loss to this community of 900 vouchers. And we are certainly working to keep that loss and find ways to support families as they are facing more and more cuts and loss of government support. So all of these cuts will hit the families that we serve extremely hard. The need for emergency food, housing, and family support will increase dramatically. So that's kind of the current. Let me talk about the past. In the early years of SOS, we also had budget protocols. Some stories coming out of these guys about how those were met and what kinds of things staff had to do. Government cutbacks were common as well back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Thanks to dedicated volunteers and supporters, including all of you, SOS kept going. Sorry, can't keep my pages down. When SOS was a 24-hour crisis line, the volunteers were told, don't be the one to turn the light out at SOS. Volunteers were encouraged to stay committed, show up on time for their shifts, and make sure that SOS was always there for people in need. We kept the light on, and we're going to keep the light on through these difficult times. During the pandemic, we saw an outpouring of support from all of you and the community at large. It was thanks to them and you that SOS was able to increase staff and services and prevent eviction for more than 1,500 households during the pandemic. It is thanks to you and other local leaders that we will be able to expand shelter this year even as federal housing resources are shrinking. Thank you for all that you do to make this community a place where families can find the support they need to thrive, no matter how bad their circumstances. Thank you for the difference that you make in the lives of others. I'm proud to work with all of you. And now I'm excited to introduce SOS's Chief Operating Officer, Lynn Alexander. Yeah. Lynn joined our team about 3 years ago and oversees all of our program areas. She's going to be the family facilitator.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being out here today. And as Rhonda referenced, I'll work through a couple of key questions for our illustrious panel today. I would first like to give each person, and I'll pass the mic as I'm doing this, I'll give each person an opportunity to introduce themselves and share with the group here how you came to be involved with SOS. So I'll start with wait, what happened? I was going to say ladies first.
Yeah.
Okay. She is deferring to Mike, so Mike, could you start us?
Sure. How I got started at SOS. See one of my fellow starters here, Kathy. In 19, should I tell the whole story? The whole silly story? Okay, the whole silly story goes like this. It's kind of a, it's typical college guy story, okay? I'm a chemistry biology major. That's what I was. I was kind of a, nerdy, quiet kind of guy. I came out of my family. My dad was a union organizer, UAW guy. So, I came out of that sort of a little more political side of the world and did some campus organizing and stuff. But still, I was pretty quiet, and I wanted to meet girls. So, yeah, right, exactly. So, there was a friend of mine from high school. She was, I think, the cutest girl in high school. Then she sat next to me in band in high school. And so I knew she lived in a dorm near me at EMU. So I went over to visit her, and of course she totally blew me off. But her roommate was Gail Greenhut, who was one of the original coordinators, I guess, of SOS. She did all the training and stuff. So I kind of was hanging out there for a little while, and she said, hey, you should get involved with this. We're trying to help things, and we're trying to do stuff. So I went to training, and I think we just figured out Kathy and I were in the same training in 72 or 3 when we were kids. And so that's how I got involved, and then I started to become a nice person. I learned about empathy and listening, and doing all that kind of good stuff.
SOS does that to you.
Yeah, I know, it does. And I think
It's a virus that we all want.
That's right.
And so that's always been my, what I found the most important thing at SOS. In fact, I had my kids all go through the training when they were late teenagers. And my daughter, she's now a doctor, she just at Christmas time, we were talking about it. She goes, I still use the training when I'm talking to patients and stuff like that, all the listening skills I learned there. So that's how I got involved. It's girls. It's always girls.
Thank you. Okay, John.
Yeah, I was a EMU student, and we had lots of parties in 1969. And one of the party girls, Nancy Pastor, said, damn, John, you talk a lot. You should come with me over to SOS. We're starting this thing where you call in, you say, I'm suicidal, and you give them answers. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I can't. She says, oh, no, just show up. And so I showed up, and I was amazed. I had natural talent. I was so gifted. It was exciting that I could engage people and get them to join and train it. We had 100 people in Prairie Hill at one training session. And we went from 12 people in the basement with John in the Bowen, Snow Health Center, and John Vandenberg, who was a psychologist, was told to start this phone line. And he came, so he was the one that put out the flyer. So he came downstairs and said, well, you all got to figure out how to run a crisis center. And I stood up, I said, well, I'm good with people, I'll be personnel director. Another guy stood up and says, I'm good at publicity, I'll do publicity. Another third guy stood up and said, I will be the director and manage it, but only for 6 months. And I said, so that was Rick Moran, the director, Jeff Springfield, for publicity, and me doing personnel. So I created a training thing where we had training in the basement of Catholic Social Services, where you did the fall, and catch the person and teach him to trust, all those really important things. And I was told, well, Catholic Social Services said, we'll give you a car and gas. And I said, well, let's call it the Flying Crisis Squad. And we'll go out, a male and a female, and we'll help people in the community. And none of us were afraid, because when you're at that age, the only thing you're afraid of is being embarrassed. We could step into anything. Nothing scared me. I was relentlessly moving forward. So then I was handed this thing, and John said, you've got to write a grant. I said, really? What's that? It's a long way of asking for money. I said, okay. So I went home, and my dad was a brilliant man. And I said, how do you write a grant, Dad? And he said, fill the whole damn thing out. Don't leave any blanks. You don't have to lie, but you sure bet don't undercut anything. When they ask for a number, you've got a number. And so we've been keeping track of each call, who, what, where, when, and how on little it was from noon to midnight. I went in to study in the morning at 9, and someone called that was suicidal at 9 in the morning. And I talked to her for 3 hours, got her brother over to her house, and was able to find out she was a Christian, and gave her that language. And I just had a wonderful time. I thought, boy, this is going to work. I said to my dad, well, what if I don't know the answer? He says, that's not, the answers aren't important. Everyone has their own answer. It's for you to listen and ask the right questions. Just keep your eyes open and don't let anyone tell you anything but they can survive. I said, well, I can do that. And so then I started getting a salary, $331 a month, big time. And I wrote a second one, and the salary went up to $1,000, and I lost my own job because a master's degree from back east of New Jersey got the job. So I was out the door, and they threw her out because she was an incompetent boob. And I got to go back for 4 months, and until they hired someone with a master's degree, and that's when I put my application into University of Michigan for my master's degree. But I was a history major. I will always remember the day I looked at the pamphlet and saw qualifications to get into the School of Social Work. History major, the study of people. I said, great! Because I'd already started a crisis center, and I was only a B student and I was male, so good luck in getting into Michigan, because the only men were on the other side of being able to be hired. But yeah, all the universities had to make up for all the prejudice that was in the past, and I agreed with trying to put the black race and other people ahead, helping them get ahead. But anyway, I got my master's degree from Michigan, moved out west, and I helped deinstitutionalize the mental health institutions where they were locking people up for a lifetime. I was told never to discharge anyone because the worst people would come in. You just keep the good people there. And I waited till I got in the union, went to the superintendent and said, is it true that we only discharge people if they die? Why would you say that? Well, because that's what's happening. I was told to shut up and stay in the closet or go take a long walk or buy a book. And I don't want to do that. So then I started getting them to turn around, and I moved people all over the state of Oregon. We didn't have to put people on the street. It was group homes and nursing homes and halfway houses. And so Oregon is a beautiful place. So the state paid for me to drive all over hell and really enjoyed the experience of still being able to help the homeless. And I had a brother that was mentally ill, and that's where my heart came from.
Thank you, John.
Always grateful.
All right, we're going to hear from Africa. Thank you, John.
Thank you both.
So I was not a student at EMU. I was actually employed at the University of Michigan in one of my first roles. I think I started volunteering at SOS about 2 or 3 years after I started working at the U. A friend was talking about SOS and that they needed somebody, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to the information session. I went to the information session, and Barbara, I think Rhonda heard this story. Chuck Keeper, who was the director at SOS, led the session, and he talked about the values of SOS and what was really important for SOS. And he used the parable, I'm going to use the language of the 90s, where he said, SOS is this: if you feed a person a fish, they eat for a day. But if you teach a person to fish, they eat for a lifetime. And in that moment, I made a person who taught fishermen. And so started there. I did, at the time that I was there, I went through the basically 100 hours of training. And we had to do 10 shifts with another counselor before you could be, they would let you loose on the phone by yourself. Because I had a day job, I would normally come in like from 8 to midnight or 8, I would sometimes do 8 until 4 in the morning to get my 8 hours in I needed to, because I worked and had another life. And I can remember getting a call from Mike, who used to be a long-term staff person there and kind of like ran the crisis line, who said to me that my co-counselor was sick. And this was my last shift working with somebody. And he said, are you comfortable doing it by yourself? I was like, in my head, no. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And we had heard all the ghost stories about being in the Octagon House on River Street. And so I made it a point to get there early before my shift started, so I could go upstairs and walk the whole building to make sure there was just nobody in there but me. And when the counselor left, probably around 10 o'clock, I started hearing footsteps upstairs. And I was like, now I know how to walk this building. And I went to, this is a true story, I went to the stairs and I yelled upstairs and said, look, I got my Bible with me, I will cast you out, demon. You stay upstairs, I'll stay down here, and we're going to have us a good night, okay? From that point on, I never heard another set of this stuff.
Thank you for your
But then it went on from me being a crisis counselor to being part of the on-call team, to being part of the training team. And I agree with you, like everything that I learned at SOS, I still use today in my role at University of Michigan 37 years later. And it has been a wonderful opportunity. I did some of everything I did. I was part of the planning committee for the 30th anniversary celebration. And Letitia Bird, who was a long time volunteer there, got up that night and said, Alfreda, you know how to throw a party. It's like, it wasn't just me, it was a whole bunch of us who did this. But it was a really great time, and I miss the camaraderie. When you had to sign up for shifts, there would always be people just hanging out at the house. We were also trying to get those prime shifts because everybody worked too. But there was, and I made some lifelong friends that I still talk to and see from SOS. So it's been a pleasure, a true pleasure.
I'm going to move on to just a couple of key questions we want to hear and get their memories flowing. So, Frida, what is a memory you have of someone you really helped at SOS? And that question will be the same for everyone.
The person that stands out the most for me is, because I worked those overnight shifts and SOS was 24 hours, and so the door stayed open. And I had a gentleman who came in, and he had missed the bus to get to Ann Arbor to get to the shelter. And so he was trying to see if he could, because we would have people sleeping on the couch in the community room at SOS during that time. And so when he came in and I was doing the assessment for him, and I said, I believe I'm getting a scent of like a whiff of alcohol. Have you been drinking today? And he said, of course I've been drinking. I'm an alcoholic. I was like, okay, thank you for your honesty. Go get a couch. That is the one that I think really stands out the most for me, because just because this person, had, what he thought was, yeah, I've owned it. It wasn't about me saying, oh no, you can't come in here. It was me looking at that person, seeing the person and saying, here you go. And so it's a very valuable lesson to look beyond what people tell you and to see the person. And I still do that today. And I still think about him as when I'm telling other people, when I have staff or teammates who are just looking at what this person is defined as and not seeing the person.
Valuable lesson. Thank you.
During my service, we had a lot of trippers out there. People were taking all kinds of acid, mescaline, and peyote. And people were being stuffed in closets, and then they'd call us and say, could you come get this guy? He's acting really crazy. Sure we will. And so we were able to go out and rescue these people. I went out to the house and this guy meets me at the door and he goes, that policeman who's walking by me, he's just leaving my roommate. He's got about 1,000 razor blade cuts all over him. And they're leaving him. And I said, that's why I'm here, sir. And let's go upstairs and meet him. So it happened that the policeman walking down had beaten me unmercifully and threw me like a sack of potatoes in the back of the car, knocked me out, and then kicked me into prison, in the jail, stripped my clothes off, and kicked me unconscious again. And I woke up in ambulance going to U of M. And I told U of M, I'm a director of a crisis center in Ipsy. I don't think I'm crazy. If you could just give me some clothes, though, it'd be appreciated. And in those days, you didn't know you were supposed to take pictures, but I rescued that guy, and I was up on a ski resort in northern Michigan, and he came off and put his skis next to me with his wife. He said, this is the man that saved my life. He saved my life. I had all these cuts. The devil was talking to me through the TV, and he had me call my mother. And he told my mother what to say. Don't freak out, just tell him, John is a good man. Do what he says. So I will do what you say, sir, because I love my mother. You do love your mother, don't you? And he went with me, and that was my favorite. Because you don't go into this work wanting a thank you, because you're not going to get it. Your heart will be big, and your soul will be great, but no, don't wait for the thank you. So the one that you get will really count.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell two quick ones. One is, I was just talking to Kathy again. I'm going to keep referring to her. And she was we were reminiscing about on-call stories. And the story that she said was the one story that, they were somewhere and at someone's house, and they had to keep telling the person, sir, we'll stay here as long as you put the gun down. And that's the kind of crazy shit we used to do. We would go into houses, and it was pretty crazy. Okay, so now my story. And it's going to be a little bit vaguer than this, but I'm trying to remember when this was, but I think it was the early 80s, when all the auto plants were closing down, and Willow Run was closing down, and there was just a big problem with just a gazillion sort of non-hippie type people getting laid off. And one of the things that we talked about as kind of a board, and the people that were running SOS at the time, was we said, you know what, we got to reach out to these people. And what we did was we did a number of empathy trainings for these auto workers and I want to say we did about 8 or 9 of them with about 20 people apiece, 20, 30 people apiece. And the idea was not to have them volunteer at SOS, but to go back out in the community with these listening skills, because we were long-haired hippie, no auto worker's going to talk to us. So the idea was if we can train these cadres of people to have those skills, because we felt the skills were actually as important as keeping the phone lines open. And those people out in the community would then